So we're back here working on the KZ305. This will be the third video that I've done. I actually had an introduction and then a part 1 and part 2. So this is part 3, so make sure you check out the other videos first if you're just finding this. Well, picking up where I left off here, we've got the carbs out again, and I'm going through them one more time. I had an issue in the previous video where the bike would run, but it would have really only run on one cylinder and it ran poorly. We've pulled the carbs out, and I'm going to go through them again. So we've got the carbs apart on my bench again. Now, the left carb was the one that was working. I was able to run the bike, but it ran quite poorly. And after pulling these apart and going through them even deeper than I did before, I think I've learned a couple things, and I think I know why they didn't run very well. This carb did not run at all, and I'll show you in a second as to why. So here's the carb that did run, and I've got it taken apart. And I will admit, one of the pieces that I was unable to get the first time around was the bleed pipe. The bleed pipe protrudes slightly up into the carburetor there. You can see the two ports there where two different jets protrude in. And I couldn't get the bleed pipe out, but what I found an easy way to do it is to take a wooden dowel, in this case a broken brush, and you can push it down on top of that and then use that to drive that out. It won't damage that. So I did that with this carb. I've got the bleed pipe out now, and it's actually relatively clean. I blew it out with carb cleaner. I'm going to put it in my ultrasonic bath again. But this side was pretty good. I didn't do it the first time around, but I made sure I cleaned these three ports here. They're coincidentally big enough to put the straw from carb cleaner in. And I was able to blow easily through all three of them and have them shoot out the bottom. That was the left carb, which was working. The right carb, however, was the problem child. And I had some issues here. So number one, I couldn't get the bleed screw out at all. And in fact, when I actually did, it looked quite nasty. In fact, I haven't cleaned it up yet. But there is, if I'm able to get a good zoom in there, there's the bleed pipe. And it is nasty. It's actually plugged up. So we're going to go ahead and clean that up a little bit more, and then that should be good to go. I've used carb cleaner on the passengers in here, so everything in this carb is pretty cleaned, except for I have one more problem here, and that's with these three holes in the front here. So the two outside ones easily blow clean through and out the bottom. The middle one is completely plugged. So I'm going to have to keep working at that to get that one unplugged. This carb has already been through my ultrasonic bath a number of times, and it seems to not want to free that middle port up. So I'm going to go ahead and continue cleaning. I may have to get some small guitar wire and see if I can manually clean that out. So we have all the parts for the left carb laid out here. Everything has been cleaned and gone through. I'm actually quite satisfied with how well this carb turned off. If you remember correctly, this was the one side that actually was working, but it wasn't working well. And the reason was this is the bleed pipe. I didn't take this out and clean it out. But I went through it pretty well. You can kind of see daylight through there. So that's all cleaned. Every single one of these holes has been cleaned. So I'm feeling a lot better with how this turned out. Another thing I forgot to clean the first time around were these three holes right here. And if you notice, the carb cleaner straw fits perfectly in them. So it kind of makes it easy to blow through. But you can see the paths on the bottom. So for instance, we have 1, 2, 3. And the outermost one here will blow out in this area. The middle one will blow out in this port. And this one here will come down here and make a dog leg, and it'll blow out here. So all I did was flip it over, insert my carb cleaner here, a couple squirts, and you can see a clear stream come out there. Once all three of those were clear and all of this was cleaned out, I'm feeling pretty good about the status of this carb. The air pilot screw goes in this hole. There's a small port. I know my lighting is terrible in here. There's a small port right here that's going to blow through. And that passageway also travels down here, down here, down here. And I believe it blows through, don't quote me on this hole here. But it could be this one here. But I shot carb clean through all of them. I shot compressed air through them. Everything I feel quite confident about this carb. The other carb, however, I still have a problem clearing the middle port here. I'm unable to do so. It's the smallest one. So I need to get myself a small guitar string to kind of feed in there to help clear that. So we're going to work on that a little bit more. But this carb is pretty much ready to go and to go back to be assembled. So initially I debated if I was going to do a how-to on rebuilding the carb this time around, but I decided not to. I kind of realized that I'm not quite familiar myself with these carbs enough to explain it. So more or less I'm just kind of showing some of the steps I did. I basically followed the service manual, but it's pretty easy to see how these carbs came apart and went back together. The key was that I just didn't fully take it apart the first time around. The service manual does have a good diagram, so I would recommend following that. Now, one thing I am checking here is that in the manual it does say that this vacuum diaphragm inside, when you block this port, it should take longer than 10 seconds for it to fully drop. So here I'm just kind of holding my finger over it, lifting it up, and then just holding it to see how long it takes for it to drop. These are holding pretty good. I used a small piece of guitar wire to finally clear that inner passage. With that removed, it clutched out easily with some carb cleaner. And then here I'm just reassembling that second carburetor. So carburetors have been fully gone through again for the second time. I think I did a much better job this time. I did some reading on forums, did some reading through the manual, and I think I've paid attention to most of the areas I need to. I really didn't pay much attention to these areas here, these 3 ports. I kind of assumed the ultrasonic would take care of it, but really I needed to get in there and blow all 3 of those out clear with carb cleaner and compressed air. So once I did that and I removed the bleed pipes. The bleed pipes were hard to remove and I didn't want to damage them until I read a tip about using a wooden dowel to push them through. So after doing that, I cleaned everything up. Pilot screws came out. Everything came out nice. Everything is clean. Fully confident in this carb now. Really, the first time I did it, I kind of just did a half-assed job. I just wanted to get the bike running. But I paid attention this time, so let's get this back on the bike and see how it does. So I've got the carbs back in. A little tricky to get them in, but I'm kind of getting better at it. I've got the bike on a trickle charger just to charge the battery up. Next few minutes, I'll spray some starter fluid in there. I'll back it out, and I'll see if I can get this thing running. All right, it fired right up. I had to use the starter fluid. Previously, the tack was sticking, so I removed that. We'll address that later on. But I'm going to go ahead and let it warm up a bit and see how she runs. Let me go ahead and demonstrate what the tack is doing. I just have the cable connected to a drill. But basically, when you would get on it, it would be very slow to respond under 4. As you can see, let off the drill, doesn't really do much. So full speed, and then once it's over 4,000, very responsive, but then it just very sluggish. So when it was idling up here, we'll just hover at like 1, and if you blipped it, as you can see, going from, let me let it go down to 1 first. So if I was idling at like around 1 and then blipped it, doesn't do anything. In fact, you have to hold it. So imagine going to wide open throttle and holding it. Yeah. It comes down quick, but this is not going to do. So the cable's been lubricated. I've gone through that, cleaned it up. Really, the issue is the tack. If I take the inner cable out, it's a little tricky to show on camera and put it in here and spin that. It is the tack itself and nothing to do with the cable. I've looked at videos on how to take these apart, and there's a crimp in here. You kind of have to peel it. And then I wasn't 100% sure I'd be able to do anything with this. So what I ended up doing was just hopping on eBay and finding a clean tack for around 50 bucks shipped. So we're just going to swap that in. I'll put this aside and we'll see what that does. The new tachometer has showed up. So overall, it's in relatively good condition. In fact, I may actually use this portion here on my bike, as the one I have has a little bit of rust on it. But the only difference I can see really is the needle on this replacement one is a little bit more sun faded, so this one's probably gotten more use. Then this one, you can see a nice bright orange needle, orange here. But the most important thing here, again, here's the used one. You can see no response, and then it just doesn't move. And now here's the replacement one by comparison. So that's what I would expect. So we'll go ahead and swap this unit on, and that should take care of that. So I put a little lubricant down there, just have it idling, and as you can see, it spins quite nicely. I did change these to LEDs. I know I said I would leave them, but to be honest, I hate old bulbs. I like bright, nice, clean light. It does make a difference at night. And like I said, I did change the gauge lighting to LED. I just think it's a fuller, cleaner light. So even though I won't probably ride this at night ever, I'd like this. So I've been doing some work off camera. I've been just going through a couple of my checks here regarding setting my pilot screws. So the pilot screws are located right here, and on this model it's a fuel screw. So I've been going through some of the adjustments for that. The manual states to set it, I believe, at 2 1/4 turns from out. So when I initially started it, when the bike was running poorly, I had them set incorrectly. I think I had one set almost 4 turns out, and obviously the bike didn't run well. But I've since turned those to 2 1/4, and I've done some tuning regarding listening to the idle go up and down and such. Made a small tweak. I'm maybe at like 2 1/2 on one and 2 1/4 on the other, but I think I got it pretty good. Another thing I did was I take a piece of clear fuel line, check my float level. That was good. And then the final things I did was balance the carbs using some vacuum gauges that I had. And the easy way to do this is to use MIG welding torch tips. If you remove that screw there, these thread right into there. I believe it's M6 by 1.0 thread pitch. And I simply thread those in, hooked up my vacuum gauges, and then in the middle of the carb, you can kind of see the screw right there is your sink screw. I just kind of made an adjustment until they're about even, locked it down, came back, played my idle screws a little bit. I got this thing running pretty well. I'm going to just show some videos. I'm going to do a cold start, so I'll let it sit for a couple days until I get a chance to go and fire it up again. I'll do a cold start, and then I'll just show me riding off, because ultimately that was my goal here. So stay tuned. All right, so cold start. You have to take my word for it. Ice cold engine has been sitting a few days. Turn the fuel to on, choke all the way up, start it. All right, that's going to wrap this video series up. I've met my goal here, which was to get the bike drivable and ride off and be able to basically ride it around. I've taken a number of rides through the neighborhood with this thing, and it's running quite well now, so I'm definitely happy with it. But overall, all that's left to do at this point is really just go through and start cleaning up some of the chrome, some of the metal, and basically polish it up. But it was fun to dive into this project and learn a number of things here regarding bikes in general. I think I can kind of take that knowledge and apply it to maybe other bikes. So maybe stay tuned. I'll find another project bike and we'll go from there. Thanks for watching.